Ketchup.
Thanks, Trish.
Hi, Trish.
Hello, everyone. Katie, Bina, I'm enjoying your matching yellow sweaters.
And our literal matching sofas with matching
walls
and everything. Yeah.
Ah,
Our walls
so
the same color.
They're not exactly the same color. Mine's a bit more blue.
As are the same color as they were in the flat, because we did like 4 tester pots in this house, and then we were just like, fuck it. We liked what we had before.
We basically went to Bina's and we're like, we like this. Let's decorate our house like this.
It works. Bina, you have good taste.
I don't know where you can get a curtain of paper crayons from.
You just have to spend months and months and months folding them. Alternatively, go to a wedding where someone else has done that and you can take away like half a curtain of paper cranes, because we don't have all of them. Some of them are in my like cousins' kids' bedrooms and stuff. As they're getting quite sun faded where they are.
Does that mean it's time to start making cranes again?
I don't know, man. I was gonna say we already made 1,000, but I think we maybe made 1,400 because Alan did some drastic wrong maths quite early on. And when I say we, I was quite busy making a wedding dress, so it's mostly Alan. Hi, Andy.
Your wedding dress is so good too. I love that you can wear it in like different pieces. It was really, really smartly designed.
And I have now worn at least a bit of it on another occasion, and it's only taken 3 years. Although 1.5 years of that was in the pandemic, so I feel like dressing up wasn't really a thing. Ian,
So
what
really,
it was taking us on.
Tube.
Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Doyle? I feel like I haven't seen your face in so long.
I know I was a little bit off the grid for the last week or so. Just more like kind of trying to get my mind sorted or my life sorted. I applied for a job today, so that's good.
well done.
Thank you. Yeah. I might also just like be with camera off for most of today, I think.
That's it.
Nice to be here and to see you.
It's totally okay. I'm glad we got to see your face for a bit and that you're here anyways. I feel like we've all had some days where we've just showed up and lurked and enjoyed that someone's going to read us a story and we can be with friends without needing to say anything or have anyone look at us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But yes, Ian, are you taking us on an adventure?
Absolutely, definitely, yes. An adventure from work to home.
Home is an adventure in its own right.
Going to work so exhausting. I went to work today, like actually physically went to work, and I was much more tired than working. I've got so used to working from home, and then it was just harder to get things done because people kept wanting to like have conversations, which is nice, but also also inconvenient. And then it was hard to leave because people wanted to have conversations, and then I left late. So. Katie, yeah, you have to do the thing. It's a story time.
Shit, my book's in next to the bed. Be right back.
Oh wait, where are we up to? Because I've read this, but I haven't been catch-up crewing. What was the last thing that happened?
I am
3
running
sessions.
away. I just came to see your face. Because I am not caught up.
Yeah, Andy, what was the last thing that happened?
The last thing that happened. Do you want sort of a recap? Do you still want a recap of the last session?
I wouldn't mind a little recap if you're up for it. Also, I don't know about anybody else, but your mic sounds really quiet to me.
Yeah, it
was really
wasn't-
quiet. I was catch up during the last session, and it was really, really quiet then as well.
All right, let's try this so that I don't have to shout. Because now it's next to my face. Is this better?
It's okay. I think it's a bit louder than without the mic. Yeah.
Okay, how's now?
It's okay for me with my speakers. I don't know about anyone else.
I can hear you fine. You're just quieter than everybody else.
Yeah, and if it bugs me, I can just plug in a speaker.
It's because my input volume for the microphone were super low.
Yeah, you fixed it.
It was on automatic adjustment and it was like 15% equivalent on the slider. Is it a bit better now? Do you need more?
It's so much better now.
Okay. Cool. This is 30%, so I can make it super loud. Right. Let's see if, right. Nope, that would be maybe, okay, we did that. I can't remember where last time started. Oh, gold key, that should be where the previous one left. Okay. There we are. I found the chapter because I kind of don't really remember what was going on in the previous one. Oh yeah, Grahambury has no job because he was cast away by the mayor. So he's in the shambles it's basically a homeless refuge. They call it a refuge. It's homeless housing and they do odd little jobs in exchange for staying there and being fed, which is quite nice. And he gets this marvelous idea to go and do a survey of Rotherweird's exterior fittings because he just noticed something was a bit askew and he was like, right, I'm going to check all of these things just as a hobby. Finch reads Aurelia Rock's letter that she wrote in the previous session, where she tells him about all these weird things that are happening. So he decides to believe her and try and meet Fernsane, who he has no idea about. Like, he doesn't know who this Fernsane is, never saw him before, that sort of thing. Valorhand disguises herself as this super sexy librarian running a traveling library and goes to Oblong's house and sort of seduces some information out of him, which is quite hilarious. It was quite fun to do Sexy Valor Hand Librarian. Obviously, Oblong falls for it because he's a man and he's pretty gullible in general. There was an actual punny book that she gave him. Oh, yes. Gullible's Travels. So she does this thing and she tries to get some information out of him while getting him drunk on Old Ferdy's Feisty Peculiar. And then she buggers off, leaving him sort of bewildered. And she finds out about the church that he had been in, the one with all the dust and the frescoes on the wall, so she goes exploring. Sir Veronal is very intrigued by the Roman recipe book. He's like, ooh, I got my hands on this book. And thinks about what to do next. There's not a lot of super important stuff in there, just people trying to get to the next step in their plans. Ferenzen has a bunch of worries about what's going on at the moment. He got a letter from Finch asking him to meet, which is progress. And he sends a very sort of coded message back to him. And then makes a list of the people that he could or could not trust and the in-betweens. To potentially form an alliance of sorts. Ferox keeps trying to see if that white tile is going to reactivate at any point. He's just kind of sitting there and waiting for it. His nose is kind of twitching because he scents a new smell. He's like, oh, what is this? It's a man. We're not told who this man is, but Ferox goes kind of hopeful but deeply uneasy. And the man's just kind of like, hey, old friend. And then we get a little bit of old history. Some things happen in 1571. Sir Robert Oxenbridge is getting a letter saying that a friend of his is long dead. Sir Henry Grassel was long dead, and now finally Oxenbridge finds out through this little letter, and he's like, oh no, what is going on? And he takes out his rusty sword and starts to like shine it back to life. And then May happens. They have a May Day fair. Super colorful. Everybody's going out to the field for a picnic. There's performers and sellers of things and, fun stuff, things you get at the fair. And the mayor and his wife come along being like, oh, we're the mayor and the wife. And then from the other side, Sir Veronal and Lady Slickstone come in like, oh, we're the rich people in town, and everybody likes them more than they like Snorkel. So obviously Snorkel gets super envious. Or actually he gets jealous because they're going to take his place and, oh my goodness, this is horrible, etc., etc. Oblong hopes to see Cecily Sheridan there, but obviously she's not going to show. But he writes a little bit of the Ballad of Midsummer Fair. Hooray, progress. Strimmer's angry because Veronal didn't give him any attention. And Valorhand keeps trying to experiment to see how Veronal shoots lightning out of his fingers, and she's like, it's got to be something. It's got to be a device that he'd put in his fingers or something. I don't know what. She's trying to figure it out, but she can't. And Grahambury slept through the entire fair because he didn't have any job to do at the fair. And his hobby job is happening at night. So, he was just like, yep, whatever. And that's where we left it. We've got a green chunk. That starts at a sip of tea. And that's chapter 2 of the month of May, which is called A Monstrous Meeting. Valorhand abandoned her lightning contraptions the day after the fair to fret over a different puzzle with these pieces discovered so far. Sir Veronal's reopening of the manor. How did he come to buy the house? The bolt at the party. The death of Mrs. Banter. The church frescoes. Flask's disappearance. And Strimmer's sudden change of attitude, which had brought an unhealthy interest in her movements out of school hours. The first 3 had potential connections, but instinct told her the others mattered too. Literature for Valorhand meant scientific text. She had never probed the origins of the town, how its independence came about, or who had built its oldest buildings, or why. She had not even thought to query the origins of the unusual tower in which she worked. Curiosity diminishes the closer you are to home. Now her perspective changed. The manor and the church felt highly significant. She had been to the belfry. Now she needed to understand its coded messages. The night of the fair would be too dangerous, with revelers loose on the streets. But the night after always witnessed a lull for hangover recovery time. She went to the Undercroft at 11 or so, earlier than usual. She hauled herself up to the roof line, a moment that never failed to excite. The slate-greyed roofs like a pitching sea, and above them the towers, some lit, some not, the masts of a fleet at anchor. Little did she know that her every step was being recorded by the tiny tracking device in the sole of her right shoe. Her destination lay on the other side of the Golden Mean. She worked her way to the North Gatehouse, glimpsing only one pedestrian on her journey, a lone figure, bent over a street drain, drunk, presumably. She did not give him a second thought. Sculptures of men and women reading in various attitudes adorned the wooden columns of the entrance portico to Rotherweird Library. An island in the centre of the main reading room allowed reception a good view of their visitors. 4 spiral staircases led to 12 alcoves on the first floor, also open to view from below. The more recondite sciences lurked in small basement rooms off a single rectangular passage, their doorways adorned in gold lettering with alliterative flair. Quarks, quasars, and quantum M, fiction furious and fantastical, and so on. Valorhand came only at night. Under the eaves, a row of skylights looked over racks of reserve second copies and outdated early editions. Alarms protected the more valuable books, but not here. Once in, Valorhand would vault from the ground to the first floor, planting the balance beside the central island. She would jump from side to side without stopping until she had landed in every alcove, 1 to 12. A gymnast's clock patience. Tonight, though, she had come in the hope that the library's more arcane rooms might bring coherence to the fragments of her puzzle. To the basement and wandered along the rectangular passage. Her eerie green tube light made the silent warren of the lower rooms feel like catacombs. After a fruitless 20 minutes in architecture, she removed her shoes and settled in astronomy, asteroids, and astrophysics, having been unexpectedly engaged by a recent lecture on antimatter from Professor Blethel. Only then did she in the soles of her feet. She walked towards the right-hand shelves and the sensation strengthened. She walked the other way and it weakened. She followed the pulse into the next room, gems and geology, where the signal intensified slightly. She shook her tube light and titles came into view, some devoted to precious stones, other to less rarefied rock types and volcanoes. She paced the room slowly, moving the small desk and 2 chairs aside to expose the hotspot, just off-center, beneath a small, nondescript rug. She rolled up the rug and sat on her haunches. She could see no discoloration or other sign of activity. It took an hour of painstaking work to extract the wooden nails and prise up the floorboards without causing damage. A cavernous space opened below. She tied her light to the rope and lowered it, illuminating a jumble of huge slabs of stone. Sarsens, judging from their size and rough-hewn surfaces. She retrieved her shoes before squeezing her slight frame through. The chamber had no obvious entry or exit. On the only patch of bare ground, a single jet-black square tile had been set in the floor. The refined craftsmanship of the flower etched into the surface contrasted with the brutishness of the huge stones. She rested the flat of her hand on the tile. The energy was palpable. Around the stone, strange luminous plants flourished, tiny white skeletons littering their fleshy leaves. They were carnivorous. She had never seen their like before. She left her pole on the ground and, with her light in her right hand, stood on the tile. Her head rushed to her feet and her feet to her head. Instinctively, she raised her arms and shut her eyes as the tile sucked her in. Unbeknown to her, the process destroyed the tracker beneath her right foot. Although underground and still beside a black tile, Valorhand quickly realized that she had exchanged the underground chamber for a circular end to a winding passageway. Huge stones set in the walls supported the roof. Duckboards paved the way ahead, lit by luminous purple-yellow rocks. Above her head, the dome of the ceiling boasted a mosaic, a young man with an intelligent face animated by a quizzical expression. An intimate portrait. Relaxed by its humanity, she nonetheless advanced slowly and on tiptoe. Racks were attached to the walls with handwritten labels. Pickled rolls, blackberry coulis, and dried burnt blood. One shelf contained a row of ancient cookery books, whose spines were stained with smudged, earthy fingerprints. Where was she? On turning the first corner, the smell of damp receded in favor of a refined fragrance. Valorhan lived off ready-made meals and had not the slightest interest in fine food, but the irresistible piquancy of this aroma, a tang of citrus with a dash of chocolate, drew her on. The passage ended in a hallway with intricately painted doors on each side and another ahead. She followed her nose through the right-hand door into an extraordinary kitchen. Embers glowed in a huge hearth, above which hung pots of various sizes on an array of iron grills and hooks, some with ladles, some not. Pulleys controlled floating shelves crammed with jars and various cuts of dried meat. On a large rectangular oak table, Valorhan counted 6 chopping boards with as many knives. A stained leather apron hung over the back of a chair. In front of the chair, a place had been laid for one, with a disconcertingly large number of knives and forks, a plate made of wood, and a horn goblet. On either side of the fire, 4 double oven gloves hung over a bare iron fender. Vixen savored the steam billowing from the various pots. She was about to pick up a ladle when she heard movement behind her. For nights to come, she struggled to exorcise the horror of the creature standing in the doorway. The face had vestiges of humanity, but like the jointed arms and legs, was predominantly arachnid. The creature currently stood on 3 legs and held in its hands a jar, a bowl, and 3 knives. The 8 eyes had human features, including eyebrows and colored irises, but were suspended on stalks rather than set in the skull. They blinked and swiveled. Between its teeth, a dark purple tongue darted this way and that. Valorhan froze. What was this abomination? "Young meat must come to me," hissed the creature, dropping the bowl and sharpening one knife against another. The unexpected voice and the equally unwelcome invitation brought Valorhan to her senses. She played for time. "I'm sorry to trespass like this. I didn't intend." "Of course you didn't. Nobody intends to come here." The voice was feminine. "I do like your books." "Then you'll enjoy being pickled." "I could get you more." "You won't come back." Again, the eyes joggled. "No, forget pickle. You'd be better raw. Tartar." Flecks of green foam bubbled in the spider-woman's mouth as the creature's body swayed in a disconcerting way. Valorhan twirled her bolas as she edged towards the table, eyeing the longest knife. She snatched for it, but the spider was quicker. With uncanny accuracy, a thread of silk arched through the air and snared the knife. With one hand, the spider yanked it back and whipped it forwards again. The blade passed just over Valorhan's shoulder as she ducked. Deciding defense was the best means of attack, she tried to push the table into the spider's body, but the oak was too heavy to shift. "Fresh, so fresh," muttered the creature, passing the 3 knives in her hand through the poison bubbling in her mouth, greening the blades. Valorhan ducked again, but the knives were not aimed at her upper body. They were thrown from under the table. Quick though she was, she could not evade all 3, and one sliced through her left leg. Clutching the wound, she arched back and hurled the sticky contents of the nearest pot at the Spider-Woman's eyes. Spirited girl means lots of blood, snarled the creature. Valorhand felt her leg stiffen. Worse, the Spider-Woman had seized a long iron rod with a sharpened end and effortlessly pushed the table aside with a shrug of her bulbous body. A new line of thread wrapped round her shoulder, reeling her in toward the point of the spear. She flayed at the silky string only to snag her arm too. She had no weapons now. She was out of reach of the fire and too close for the bullets. A new voice intervened, male and prissy, hardly that of a born rescuer. Sorry, I forgot who was meant to speak. Oh, yes. Now, look here, it said. Haven't you heard of the library regulations? The voice cut off in mid-sentence. Valorhand could not see its owner with the spider in the way, but nor could the spider. A multiplicity of arms and legs had many advantages, but one weakness, turning round. As the spider lurched about, the leveled spear moving away with her, Valorhand took her chance. Seizing a broom with her free hand, she severed the silken threads and darted through a narrow gap between the creature and the wall, almost knocking down the new arrival. She screamed in agony as her wounded leg took the weight. The newcomer, a vaguely familiar middle-aged man in a crumpled suit, stood stock still, dropping like a fish taking air, as the monstrous creature turned to face him. 2 for the price of 1, hissed the Spider-Woman. Valorhand grabbed the man's shoulder. Run, you idiot! And they did. The Spider-Woman, taken aback by the appearance of her former quarry alongside the new, hesitated long enough to allow them to get back down the passage. To Valorhand's amazement, the man stopped just before the tile. Library books. This really won't do. But before he could retrieve them, she pushed him onto the tile and he disappeared. But when she tried to follow, the tile did not respond. It needs time to recharge, she reasoned, and adopted a defensive posture, a lopsided crouch to compensate for her wounded leg. Above, the din of falling bottles and disturbed shelves around the corner of the passage ahead. Above the din of falling bottles and disturbed shelves around the corner of the passage ahead, she heard 2 syllables. Still, the Spider-Woman's voice, but in intonation and message very different. Let be. The creature appeared to be in turmoil, responding brutally to its own suggestion. Such meat. Let be, repeated the gentler voice. As the bulbous shape lumbered round the corner towards her, she backed onto the tile. This time it worked, and she found herself back in the rock chamber beneath the library, dishevelled, breathless. Grahambury moved towards her, relief evident on his face, lit only by the eerie glow of her lantern. You bloody idiot! Valorhand fell to her knees. Library Regulations, Rule 3, Bracket 4. Unless extended, all books must be returned in 3 weeks. Books in that passage have been there for... Do I know you? Grahambury. There was a Reginald, but it got lost. Everyone calls me... Grahambury, next time a giant Spider-Woman is closing in, forget your fucking library books. Grahambury winced at both the language and the message. She crawled to the tile. The energy had dissipated. The gateway was, for the moment, closed. Might it yet come through? Asked Grahambury. She glanced at the earth of the chamber. No sign of disturbance by any eight-legged creature, or indeed anything sizable. It never has. She peered at her pallid rescuer. Mentally cleaning up his features, she recognized in the crumpled suit and cadaverous looks the former town clerk. Why are you following me? Offended by what he took to be an accusation of stalking, Grahambry explained. He had been dismissed thanks in part to her protest at Sir Vernal Slickstone's party. He had been conducting a survey into a disturbing decline in the town's fabric, and he had seen her enter the library roof. He produced his set of town hall keys by way of indirect corroboration. Valorhand believed him. Such a pedant would be incapable of embellishment, let alone a lie. She softened. Well, I suppose without you I'd be tartar. She grasped her leg and grimaced. An angry green discoloration had already spread well out from the wound. Grahambry turned solicitous. You're going to the doctor. I don't do doctors. Always a first time, Miss Valorhand. I'm going to carry you. You're bloody not. Valorhand picked up the vaulting pole, but it was no use. Her injured leg would bear no weight at all. Bring it, was all she could say. The girl's condition had deteriorated by the time they reached the street. As Grahambry fretted over the quickest route to the nearest doctor, out of the shadows, snail and slug bag in hand, sauntered Rotherweird's troublesome botanist. Salt. Odd time to be browsing for books, replied Salt with an odd look in his eye. Odd time to be walking the streets, retaliated Grahambry. Odd time to be carrying. Salt broke off on seeing the injury. Good God! Before Grahambry could stop him, he sniffed the wound. Where have you been? Where did she get this? His tone was accusing. You wouldn't believe me. Oh, yes, I would. How long ago? How long? 10, 15 minutes. We're going to the Ferdies. Now. Salt placed the flat of his hand on the girl's cheek. There's only one man who can deal with this. He ripped the bottom half of his sleeve from his shirt and tied a tourniquet about the wound. I'll take the front, you take the back, and we run. Why should I trust you? Grahambry remembered Salt's pollution of Grove Gardens with Snorkel's petunia the previous spring. Salt bared his left arm. A long, ugly scar ran from the elbow to the hand. I was lucky, he said. Are you saying that's the same? It's the same, all right. 8 legs. Or are they hands? She still visits me in my nightmares. Even Salt realized now was not the time to ask how this incongruous couple had found a way into Lost Acre. It might be the burning question, but saving the girl came first. He added, if it's a bite, there's not much hope. If it's one of her knives. It felt like an eternity before they reached the Polk Land and Water Company. The girl was now cold, her color ghostly. The Polks and Gregorius Jones were playing cards. Salt took Boris aside and cut the curtsies. Boris, we must get her. He paused, then said firmly, to the Rainmaker. I'll run, offered Gregorius, as ever, inspired by a lady in distress. You won't, you're pedaling, replied Boris. Grahambry offered to stay behind so as to not slow the caravan. No, we need you. For a start, have we any keys to the north gate? Yes, but I'm not permitted to use them, replied Grahambry. You'll use them. If you're not back, I'll use the reserve caravan for the morning run, said Bert, subdued at missing out on yet another adventure. Boris placed a consoling arm on his twin's shoulder. One of them had to play by the rules. Salt joined Valorhand under a blanket as Gerhambry fooled the gatekeeper with an outrageous lie and the straightest of faces. After a frisson of self-disgust, he found to his surprise that he had rather enjoyed the experience. Boris and Jones pedaled like fanatics, the pistons and drums whistling and wheezing. Gerhambry barely knew the rural roads beyond the main highway to Hoy, but the novelty of this journey into the wild unknown did not dispel his conservatism. He was appalled that the town's long-distance transport had been entrusted to such a reckless driver. Despite the gravity of the girl's condition, Boris Polk yelled, "Yahoo!" and "Bazoom!" as they cut corners at speeds Gerhambry would have thought impossible. When well away from the town, Salt empties his bag of slugs onto the verge, as Gregorius Jones, ever the medieval knight, produced a stream of inquiries about the patient. Look to the lady. Mop the brow, Gerhambry. Hang on, dear girl. Cling to the rope. They were quick. The roads were clear and the weather dry, and in half an hour they were at the Ferdy's farm. Ferdy took in Boris and Jones as Salt carried Valorhand to Ferencin's tower. Gerhambry trailed behind, unclear as to which group to join. Follow me, man, follow me, Salt instructed him. At the door of the tower, an old man with a lively face and a firm handshake greeted them. Ferencin and Gerhambry were hurriedly introduced. The former's expression changed when he saw the wound. Here, he said, by the fire. It was the same piece of furniture on which a frozen Salt had been revived some months earlier. This evening, the battle between life and death was closer. The old man cleared a table. Crush these. He handed Gerhambry a mortar and pestle while mixing the contents of 2 small phials. The herbs smelled pungent and exotic. Gerhambry's attention was caught by the volume of objects and books on view, as well as the single room's remarkable shape. He had always assumed countrysiders to be hard-working men with limited intellect, if honest values. Ferencin cut off the girl's jeans below the knee, removed the tourniquet, and applied a steaming poultice. He gave her a tetanus injection and applied a sweet-smelling ointment below her nostrils, before turning his attention to the wound. He moved quickly and silently. The neurotoxins of this particular creature are not to be treated lightly, he observed by way of commentary. Another half an hour and our patient would be in serious trouble. As it is, I'm hopeful she'll have nothing more than a war wound to show her children. Fit young lady, I'd say. Miss Valorhand is a rooftop vaulter as well as a scientist, said Gerhambry. Is she indeed? And you? Asked Ferencin. Gerhambry. He's our former town clerk, chipped in Salt. And who might you be? Countered Gerhambry. Who indeed? Came the unhelpful response as Ferencin ambled over to his drinks rack. A rack with ginger enlivens the vocabulary, a useful side effect when describing the unusual. Salt poured as Gerhambry explained the night's events. We were in the library. Salt raised an eyebrow. It's a long story. I'm homeless, but I kept a set of town keys as security. Gerhambry was protesting too much, a fault of the innocent as much as the guilty. Keep going, encouraged Ferencin. I heard footsteps downstairs and went to investigate. There was a small room in the basement, gems and geology. The boards had been raised. I squeezed through. There was a long pole on the ground and a black tile. Ferensen and Salt exchanged glances. The black tile was in the town itself. And you stood on it, murmured Salt to himself. The tile sucks you in and spits you out. I arrived to find this monstrous spider creature. Look, please don't think I'm mad. In the kitchen of an underground house, and I regret to say, full of purloined library books. Ferensen dapped Valorhan's forehead with a sponge. Did the spider have any humanity? It spoke English for a start, and yes, Grahambury seemed lost for words. Plenty of human bits, he added, but all horribly muddled. Female? Grahambury considered. Bristly hair like a man, but voice and eyelashes of a woman. Salt watched Ferensen, who had put the same questions to him years ago, when he had staggered to Ferensen's tower, wounded by the same creature. His last question was particularly strange. Grahambury thought so too. He did not know this countrysider. The mere fact he had a way with medicine did not make him trustworthy. Isn't this a matter for the town hall? Ferensen stood away from Valorhan. His voice acquired such a tone of authority that Grahambury took a pace backwards. Like it or not, Mr. Grahambury, the town hall is corrupt. If you can't see that when you yourself worked there, then you're blind, deaf, and dumb. Worse, you don't know what you'd be giving away if you reported this. I do. How? Why do you think we suppress our history? Why does the rest of England keep us at bay? Why was there a prohibited quarter? Why are we blessed with so many gifted scientists? Why do we never pursue the answers to these obvious questions? Grahambury hesitated. He read deep pain in the old man's face. Salt interrupted. Is your black tile a metre square with a flower incised on it? Grahambury nodded as Ferensen resumed. It's not so much a door as a portal to a different plane. Isn't that right, Salt? The botanist did not reply. Every new recruit diluted his great secret. Grahambury reflected. Salt's own scar and his instant decision to take the girl to Ferensen suggested an understanding of where they had been and what they had encountered. Ferensen had now given him sufficient tasks to make it clear that he too was well informed. They seemed to be decent people, and he had no wish to share his nocturnal adventure with the mayor. Ferensen refilled their glasses. Valorhan heard the tinkle as the decanter met the edge of the glass. Warmth and feeling were returning, but she kept her eyes shut. She would learn more that way. Anything else you can tell me? Grahambury asked Ferensen. There's another door marked by a white tile. It too has a flower incised on its surface. But you arrive in a different part of the same place. Salt clenched his fists. Secrets diminished by sharing, the more so with a narrow-minded civil servant. Is this world all underground? Asked Grahambury. Hardly. It's a world not unlike ours was long ago, but with special and dangerous properties. The white tile opens in a meadow. Again, Salt winced, and again Ferensen took no notice. There are probably other ways in too. And that abomination, where did that come from? The old man's voice trembled, hinting at a suppressed emotional pain. She was not always like that, he said before abruptly changing tack. We three must make some decisions. We four, interrupted Vixen Valorhand, swinging her feet round and sitting up normally. I have questions of my own. After thanking Mr. Fernsyn, said Grahambury primly, you were at death's door half an hour ago, and Mr. Salt too. Ever the unthanked worker, he did not think to include himself. Valorhand managed a nod, but Fernsyn ignored the exchange. A meeting must be held and a company formed. The black tile had to be kept from Slickstone and guarded. Valorhand had taken in Fernsyn in his tower with no more than mild curiosity. Had she been born a countrysider, she would have lived like this. Yet now he did astonish her. As he bent over to bandage her leg, she caught in his weather-beaten features an unmistakable glimpse of a much younger man, his face captured in the mosaic on the underground passageway ceiling. So he had been there. But when? Why had he been commemorated rather than attacked? Before she could fashion a cunning question, a deep sonorous note invaded the room. 20 seconds, and the mournful voice of Doomstoxen tolled again. Seconds later, Bill Furdy burst in, pointing back through the open door and crying, "Look, come look, quick!" Furdy ran out, and though still in pain, Valorhand followed. Boris Polk and Gregorius Jones, already halfway up the hill, had stopped and were staring at the valley below. Rotherweird, ordinarily no more than a cluster of lights on the floor of the valley, flickered in and out of view, exposed by a fierce orange glow. For a town of timber, the worst nightmare had come. Fire, the great devourer. The others hurried to the summit of the hill. The spectacle held them briefly, but before Fernsyn could digest the implications, Boris had bellowed a call to arms with a single word, "Hydra!" and rushed downhill to the carabank, Gregorius Jones following at a sprint. Action was his kind of language. Fernsyn watched them go before taking control. He appeared to see more danger in what lay behind the fire than the fire itself. The odds do not favor accident, believe me. Get the beer cart, Ferdy, we're going in. He turned to Salt. We're calling a meeting. Tonight. He gave Ferdy a knowing wink. I suspect you know somewhere safe and hidden. No problem, replied Ferdy with his own knowing wink. I want you, Boris, Aurelia Rock. He paused. Oh, yes, and bring our new friends, Mr. Grahambury and the indomitable Jones, also the current modern historian. Bert, of course, but above all, I want Mr. Finch. Above all, you want me, interrupted Valorhand. Yes, yes, agreed Fernsyn. Ferdy returned to the issue of Finch. You'll have a job luring him from his lair. I doubt it, replied Fernsyn. Gather as soon as the fire is under control. Grahambury thought of the possible causes. The safety from fire regulations were comprehensive and generally well observed, but of late there had been too much casual smoking in town, a matter he had raised with the mayor on several occasions. Fernsyn's poultice had remarkably restorative properties. Vixen Valorhand thought not of her wound or people or buildings, only of fire, which he loved for its beauty, fierceness, and uncomplicated warmth. She must be up close. The fire took hold so fast that the town discovered it only minutes before the countrysiders. Frantic knocking at the window of baubles and relics brought Aurelia downstairs. Outside, Fangwin, in overcoat and a faintly ludicrous woolen hat, was gesturing extravagantly. Your house is burning, he blurted as she opened the door. Aurelia looked blank. Your other house, he added. Aurelia rushed outside. From the far end of town, smoke shot through with sparks was pouring across the sky. Other inhabitants of the Golden Mean were emerging from their homes, many with buckets. What next? Aurelia cried in despair. She pulled on jeans and boots and a jersey and a long overcoat over her pajamas. 2 vehicles left the Furdy's farm that night. The carabanc, with Boris and Jones, travelled at breakneck speed, and some 10 minutes later, the beer cart followed at a statelier pace, with a crate of pint glasses, a barrel of beer, Bill Furdy, Ferenzin, Valorhand, and Grahambury. Boris Polk cursed his impulsiveness on finding the portcullis up, but the south gate shut. The keys were still with Grahambury, but his luck was in. From a small door cut into the great nail-studded oak gate emerged a young guard, wearing an overcoat over his pajamas. Nobody's allowed in. Order of the mayor, he declared, squinting into the headlights of the carabanc. He paused. Is that you? B. Polk or B. Polk? Boris stepped out of the vehicle with a flourish, goggles perched above his eyebrows. It is B. Polk. B for Boris, and you have a choice. Price brat or superhero. What are you up to? The guard inquired suspiciously. Let me in and you'll find out, was the riposte. The guard, too distracted to inquire further into what Polk and Jones were doing outside the gates at such an hour, succumbed. Where's the fire? The late Mrs. Banter's house. She's burning like a torch. It's serious. Oh, wrong voices. Other way around. Where's the fire? The late Mrs. Banter's house. She's burning like a torch. It's serious. Boris's pace scarcely slowed despite the narrowness of the streets, and in no time, he and Jones were hurrying into the yard of the Polk Land and Water Company, where Bert stood like a sentry on duty. Hydra! Bellowed Boris. Shed's open, replied Bert. But have you done your final minor adjustments? No time for that. This is the moment she was born for, answered Boris as he sprinted off with Jones. Hydration. Or, sorry, Hydra. Nope. Oh. Chunky chapters today. Okay. There's a 4. Good. We might have a shorter one page-wise. Maybe. 3. Fire and water. It takes a disaster to sharpen any emergency service, and Rotherweird had not endured a fire on this scale in living memory. For a town that prided itself on scientific expertise and logic, the response was chaotic. The compound with the solitary fire engine was locked, and in the absence of Grahambury, the key could not be found. Once tracked down, the key to the fire engine proved equally elusive. Its route, once mobile, was blocked by a rickshaw in the Golden Mean, whose owner could not be found. The mayor's office rang Grahambury, only to be tersely informed by his erstwhile landlord that he had been evicted 2 months earlier for non-payment of rent and had left no forwarding address. Faced with this abject failure by the municipal authorities, Rotherweird citizens turned to self-help. Ladders of all sizes were retrieved from unlikely places, metal buckets likewise, and the human chain began swinging pails from hand to Pagan Lane, from the pump on the church green. Despite their efforts, the situation remained critical. Embers were smouldering on neighboring roofs, as the temperature grew so intense that dousing the flames from ladders became too perilous. Mercifully, Ether's Way did not abut Mrs. Banter's tower. Snorkel arrived with a retinue of council employees. A large striped drum designed for traffic duty on market days served as his rostrum. Snorkel seized a megaphone and climbed onto the drum. "Don't panic," he screamed. The head of emergency services ambled towards him. Snorkel leaned down, forgetting to turn off the megaphone, and cried, "This is a bloody shambles." Together they restored a semblance of order, clearing Pagan Lane of onlookers and diplomatically substituting more elderly helpers. Ladders close to the fire were recovered, and the main effort shifted its focus to neighboring gardens and roofs. Better to lose one tower than the whole town. Snorkel then made a mistake by suggesting that anyone with homes at risk should close their windows. As everyone felt exposed in a town of wood, many abandoned the human chain, and the supply of water slowed, leaving the fate of the town in balance. Smoke began to rise from the timbers of 2 adjoining towers, and the embers snagged in neighboring beams began to flicker with flame. A huge spiral of sparks soared into the sky as the top section of Deirdre Banter's tower collapsed with a roar. Valorhand worked her way to a convenient viewpoint and gazed into the inferno, her pupils dilating with excitement. She thought of the forges of myth, toiling to produce legendary weapons, the work that the North Tower now performed. She imagined a different crucible, where strands of DNA coiled and merged, blueprints for sensory organs and cerebral structures. Aurelia felt near. She suspected that her aunt's notebooks had provided not only the tinder, but an arsonist's motive. The fire was working down the tower towards the ground floor, not the other way. She caught a murmur in the crowd and followed their pointing arms to see a large cat on the first floor roof, turning this way and that, trapped. Driven as much by despair at her family
I assume everyone else has lost interest.
Yeah, it happened right after the word despair, which seemed oddly foreboding.
Oh, you're back.
Hello.
Yeah, my
we
internet
lost
did
you
a
at
flip.
despair.
Okay. Driven as much by despair at her family's misfortune as by sympathy, she seized a ladder, ran forward, and climbed to the hip of the roof before anyone could stop her. The soles of her shoes stuck to the hot slates. "Move fast and on tiptoe," she advised herself, "and you are less likely to burn." Her way towards the cat, which had its back to her.
We got to the cat. Oh no.
Okay. Where did I drop again?
We had tiptoeing, and then we had the cat, and then we lost you.
Okay. Move fast and on tiptoe, she advised herself, and you're less likely to burn. She almost danced her way towards the cat, which had its back to her. Only when it turned did she realize something was wrong. Parts of the misshapen face and body, including the eyes and blotches of pink skin between tufts of hair, suggested a half-human creature. The cat arched its neck and spat. Then, to her horror, it reared up on its hind legs and spoke. Do you have the book? Where? Aurelia looked blank, betraying her lack of a useful answer. The creature sprang, its face contorted by a mix of hatred and suffering, claws extended like knives. She ducked instinctively as the cat passed over her lowered head. Fire played around its feet. Die, child, added the creature as it leapt from the roof and disappeared. Aurelia could barely move her feet. Her soles had all but melted through, and more flames flickered from holes in the roof as the slates cracked in the heat, split and tumbled to the ground. The smoke closed her eyes. The crowd below groaned as horrified as they were transfixed. At that moment, as if by divine intervention, an extraordinary vehicle lurched into Pagan Lane. Long and thin, pillar box red with large iron wheels and a forest of multicolored wires coated in Polk-patented fire-retardant paint. Pedals on each side were manned by Jones and Bert Polk, and Boris steered. On the chassis, four white hoses lay coiled around a thicker hose. Pistons rose and fell as if in a demented sewing machine. What the hell is that? Bellowed Snorkel, megaphone back in hand. It's not licensed, it's not registered, it's not... But suppose it works, whispered the head of emergency services. While Bert secured a signature, guaranteeing reasonable remuneration if the hydra worked, Jones unwound the thicker white hose from the center of the vehicle and connected it to the nearest hydrant. Not that bloody man, Fangwin, complained the mayor, but too late. Boris had already recruited his crew of 4 and was busy distributing small boxes with sticks and switches. He gave a 1-minute crash course. Up, down, left, right, nozzle wide, nozzle tight, squirt, awake the hydra. Like cobras responding to a charmer's call, the hoses uncoiled and rose higher and higher before dipping their heads to spray water. Snorkel changed tune with alacrity, bellowing encouragement through his megaphone. Capital work, Polk, keep going. The hydra transformed a fiery scene that illuminated everyone into one of steam where few could see anything. Blinded and drenched, Aurelia lost all sense of place. Up there! Screamed the crowd, gesticulating at the swaying figure on the roof. Jones's primal chivalric urge resurfaced with a rush of adrenaline. There's a young lady, he bellowed, jumping up and down like a child deprived of a favorite toy. Boris produced a further set of controls of a different color, covered in sticky labels marked, "Do not use, untested." You're sure? Cried Bert. Do it, bellowed Jones. From a drum in the middle of the hydra, a wire ladder rose. Hold on, yelled Boris, but the intrepid gymnast needed no invitation. He was already in position, clasping the top rung. Boris flicked the switch upwards. Yeah! shrieked Jones as he disappeared into a roiling mix of smoke and steam. The ladder did not share the hose's elegance of movement, but shot upwards at breakneck speed. Boris moved the plastic control stick to the right, prompting a further expletive from the clouds of steam through which Jones was intermittently appearing. The crowd, quietened by the anticlimax that follows the death of a fire, revived. Aurelia sank to a crouch. She was slipping slowly down the roof in a treacherous mix of ash and water, lines of black rubber trailing from her melted shoes. Jones swooped from behind and swept her high into the air before being reeled back to earth, to the tumultuous ecstasy of the crowd. With a flamboyant sweep of the hand, Jones waved away the applause. "Look to the lady." A believer in traditional remedies passed a file of smelling salts across Aurelia's nostrils, with instantaneous effect. The steam cleared, and so did the crowd. From high above the town, charred fragments of the private lives of her inhabitants, as recorded by Mrs. Banter, floated down like funeral confetti. The Hydra quenching the fire. Okay, so I had planned another wee chapter, but it was a longer session and it's kind of late, so maybe we'll rethink this.
The Hive is such a good machine.
I know,
It's
right?
really good. Oh, thank you, Andy. I really
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
that. That was fun. I mean, not fun at parts, but mostly just like fun to listen.
That was intense.
That was an intense one. I just like fun as in that was an enjoyable experience.
Like we had creatures and then we had more creatures and
I am also totally thrown off by timeline because I just cannot remember what happens before this bit and what happens after.
before this bit, Oblong arrives into town, finds out that he's replacing another outsider, nearly gets run over in the carabank by Slickstone in his fancy ass car.
How much of the mystery, like how much has anyone found out at this point? It's not
so it's not the what?
it's not that much yet in terms of
We know that Slickstone is remembering things in his dreams. And we know little bits and bobs, and we found out about mixed creatures already. And just sort of surface knowledge of the mixing point from old history.
okay, cool.
And Strimmer found the Roman recipe book and went and gave it to Slickstone.
Terrible
I know. And they did that very cool lecture about space with Bolitho where Oblong became a comet. So yeah, we learned a couple of bits, and if you pay attention to some details, then you can probably pick up on a few more connections. But that's me reading the book the second time, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense. These things go together.
Yeah, I read it. I wasn't sure if we were coming back to it, so I read it after you read the first like 3 chapters.
Fair. Voices.
Yeah, it was a long
Yeah, there was a lot of voices going on there. That sounded a little grovelly.
Yeah, I picked a lot of voices that are a bit like, eh.
Okay. I'm gonna get going because I'm really tired. I'm still recovering from being sick, I think, because I just want to take naps every fucking day lately.
That's
On the bridge
okay.
last night. It's not COVID at least. So
Yay. But naps are nice.
It's weird at the moment, right? Because everyone's like,
Mm.
I'm really sick, but it's not COVID, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, wouldn't say it's fine. I'm like, at least it's not COVID.
Yeah.
I'm gonna head off as well. Have a nice
Can
evening.
we say
Okay.
goodbye to the
Should-
catch-up crew too?
That.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, catch up crew, darlings.
Don't get COVID.
Beware. Well, that we like you. We want you alive and healthy. But also beware spider women and human cats.
Maybe do a fire drill every now and then, just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah, fire drills are important. Take fire safety seriously.
Mhm.
We love
Definitely.
you.
Have a bucket of water at hand.
At any given time, always have a bucket
Yes.
of water.
Bye, Catch Up Crew.
All right.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.